6:30 now.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's 6:30. I'd like to commence our special council meeting. We've got two meetings tonight, but the first one is a public hearing on development charges. In any event, Mr. Longfellow, can you lead us in our national anthem, please?
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée des plus brillants exploits. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you very much, Joel. Appreciate that again.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
At this point, I'd entertain a motion to confirm our agenda for the special council meeting 19-18, scheduled today at the council chambers. Motion to confirm the agenda, please. Mr. Doucette, seconded by Mr. Bodner. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening on the subject? There being none, indicate. We record that, Madam Clerk. At this point, I turn the meeting over to Mr. Aquilina. It's a public hearing under the Development Charges Act.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening to you, members of council, staff, and those in attendance this evening. The purpose of this meeting is to present an amendment to the Development Charges Act dealing with a potential waiver of residential and non-residential fees for the remainder of the Development Charges bylaw, which expires in 2019. At that time, council will have a new bylaw and background report to consider, but that's not the purpose of tonight's meeting. So, Mr. Mayor, what I will do is I will just walk council through a quick PowerPoint presentation. So just so council and the public are aware, development charges under the Development Charges Act are collected for city road services, public works, fire protection services, recreational services, library services, water services, wastewater services, and administration. Some of the history, and council would be familiar with this. In 2014, we had a new development charges background report and bylaw. Subsequent to that, council wanted to have an amendment to have non-residential charges as well. And with the 2014 bylaw, what council decided to do was to waive development charges for residential uses for 2 years. In 2015, council then approved an additional waiver for 1 year for residential and non-residential uses. And again, in 2016, council once again extended that waiver for an additional year. In 2017, council once again waived those charges. And that brings us to 2018. And as I mentioned, there's 1 more year left under the current development charges bylaw. So some background, what council actually has in place, what the city has in place under our community improvement plans. We have 6 plans, and each plan speaks to development charge waivers under the community improvement plan. So for the downtown, it's 100% reduction for the CIP area. For the old Humberston Main Street area, that's 100% reduction. The East Waterfront Community Improvement Plan, it's 100% reduction. For the Brownfield Community Improvement Plan, it's a 70% reduction. And for the Gateway Community Improvement Plan, as well as the Industrial Community Improvement Plan, you have a 100% tax increment grant rebate. So if council does not decide to extend the waiver, and as I mentioned, it's not going to happen this evening, the current charges, if it's decided that no waiver be put in place, for a single family home in the urban area, it's $8,789. For the rural area, $5,955. Development charges for apartment units, we're looking at $24.96 up to $38.48 for multiple units within the urban area. Non-residential, commercial, and institutional, it's $3.23 per square foot within the urban area and $1.56 per square feet in the rural area. Industrial charges are $1.21 per square foot in the urban area and 57 cents per square foot in the rural area. So this slide here just gives some information on the exemptions that council has in place for single family homes. So you'll see in 2015, there were 15 building permits, and with that waiver, there was $105,730 in development charges that were not recovered. In 2016, 15 building permits, now is $130,251 charges that were not collected. And in 2017 and in 2018 up to today, there are 19 building permits for single family homes, and they equaled in each year $161,323 in development charges. There were other development charges for residential that did not include single family homes, and that was for the development on 220 Erie Street. That was for a street townhouse complex, and that was $49,144 that were not collected. For the apartment units proposed on 57 Minto Street that have not been developed yet, council, the city foregone $258,936 in development charges. So in total, since 2014, that is $866,711 that the city has not collected. So just some closing comments that I wrote down. So when we looked at when council first put the development charge waiver in, it has had a positive impact. We have now 79 building permits for new residential dwellings. So when you look at the history of development in the city, that's a pretty good indication that we've had some, productivity in residential development. Or one could look at, is it in fact a result of having the development charges waived, or is it because of market conditions in Port Colborne and overall in the region of Niagara? There's ebbs and flows with residential development. So is it because there are no development charges, is that an indication that we now have seen increased residential growth? And again, when you look at the history of the city's development, this has been a good 4 years of growth that the city has not experienced in the past. The other thing too is, council always and staff always give the indication that the city is open for business. So when you waive development charges and in turn you have residential development, it can be seen that we are open for business. So in the future, as I mentioned tonight, nothing is going to occur. There's things that council may want to consider. Instead of being 100% exemptions in place, does council want to consider dropping that down to 50%? Because when we lose development charges that are not covered by development, we do not have monies for the municipality to do certain works, whether it be for fire protection, for our municipal parks, for street work, water, sewer. So council, if council wants to actually have those developments occur, it's going to be funded by the tax base. Instead of having developers pay for the cost of development, council has decided they will then budget that on a piecemeal basis based on what each department is looking to have in place. And as I mentioned, we have not replenished all of the lost development charges. Council has each year has not replenished those budget monies. So that is my brief presentation, Mr. Mayor. I did have tonight's meeting in the Niagara this week, back on August the 3rd, indicating that this meeting was going to take place this evening. I've received no comments from any members of the public. Tonight's meeting, once council has any questions to myself, we will then open the floor up if any member of the public wishes to address council. So at this time, Mr. Mayor, I will open the floor up to members of council or yourself to have any questions or clarification.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. We have a first question from Mrs. Kenny and then Barbara Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Aquilina. So these are new developments. So of course, when you have new buildings, also comes with that taxes, right? Because now those properties are paying taxes. So those monies are going back into the coffers of the city of Port Colborne. So what is the average, just give me an average tax money that would be coming in on a yearly basis, not for 1 year, but every year after that, plus impact, always adds their little charges onto them, those things, so those taxes keep increasing for the resident. So how much would you say comes back into the coffers just through taxes alone?
Through Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer that question to Mr. Sinnes, who is our tax collector. I have a ballpark, but I'm more comfortable and confident that those figures come from Mr. Sinnes.
Thank you.
If he's able to provide that.
Sinnes, do you have a comment?
Through Mr. Mayor. No, I don't have any figure as to what it would be, because it also depends on the type of building and the assessment that's placed on those on the property. If it's higher assessment versus a lower assessment, depends on that as to what the tax rates are applied to. So I'd have to see what those particular properties were and what the assessments were to determine how much the city takes in versus also the region and the school boards.
Okay. That just only say that obviously we're getting money, some money coming back. Most of the houses obviously are brand new homes. And so if they're brand new homes or brand new developments, whether it's apartments, whatever, that money is coming back into our coffers. So it's not a total loss. It's money. People, we're boosting our population because people are moving into Port Colborne, and we're also, those people are boosting the economy in Port Colborne by shopping here, and we're getting their municipal taxes too. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kenny. Mrs. Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And just to build on Councillor Kenny's ideas here, so if 866,711 is not collected, like, I think it would be a really good idea if we did have that kind of a ballpark number for the next meeting of knowing kind of what's coming back in, and just so that we all know. I think we should know what that number actually is. So could that happen?
Yes.
Thank you.
Roughly.
Yeah. Yes, roughly.
Can't be exact. Councillor Demmer.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I suppose it would be Peter and maybe Dan combined, and building on the questions from my fellow councillors, we definitely do have to have the numbers. We need to know, what did we lose in development charges, what did we gain in taxes, so that we can take a look at what those would be, what the growth percentage was, all of those numbers put together. We also need to know what projects didn't happen because those funds weren't there. And if they didn't happen, did they ever need to happen? Maybe those are funds that, projects that we were budgeting for that really didn't need to be. A lot of that may be around parks, that sort of thing. Just so that we get a clear picture as to what we're doing, because clearly we're going to be faced with a decision shortly about development charges going forward. So if we're going to be looking at taking 50% reductions or taking, again, 100% reductions, we need to have those pieces of information. That would be really handy. That's it.
Thank you. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Through you to Dan. Dan, you said that the development charges could be applied to water, wastewater, parks, roads, fire department. Can you be explicit in where those development charges and how they can be spent in those areas? I was always under the assumption that they can only be spent on increases in services that the development required.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, I will definitely provide those in my next report to council, because under the development charges study, there's actually percentages what goes to fire and what percentage goes to library, museum, and that information will be provided to council. And as you mentioned, yes, the development charges are applicable to new growth. So if there is new growth, that's when those charges can be collected.
Correct. And what I'm saying is that there's only so many areas that those development charges can be spent after they've been collected, if we had collected them. You cite $866,000. And when I argued for the waiving of the development charges to begin with, to try to spur some growth, I was always under the assumption that the development charges that we did collect, when they were being spent, you would have to show growth in the need for the library to expand. You would have to show growth-related increase in the fire department to be able to spend money for the fire department. Water, wastewater, we have adequate supply and room for a lot of development that's in town, or development on the books that hasn't taken place yet. So to say that we could have spent this money on growth-related infrastructure, I find that hard to believe. Because really, in all the growth that we've had, it hasn't put any pressures on the services that we have in place right now. So I'm trying to figure out where we would have spent the $866,000 if we would have collected it, because the services that generally growth increases haven't increased in Port Colborne. So I'd like your comment on that.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, you are correct. There has to be a demonstrated need for the development charges to be spent on any sort of related growth. So that can mean that if we have some increase in population, does that then have more stress to our library? Does that mean we need to buy more books, for example? Does that mean that we have to actually have our playground equipment improved, or actually new equipment, because we now have more residents using our parks? Things like that need to be taken into consideration. Same with fire protection services. Is there now more of a strain for fire protection because now there are more residents and more calls? Is there a need to buy more fire protection equipment, a new pumper, things of that nature? So the development charges background study actually indicates the need and how those monies can be spent. And it has to be justified when you spend development charges, how that relates to those growth costs. And it could be also infrastructure, dealing with water services. We have new development. Do we need to have money put in place for upgrade or for maintenance? Those are just certain things that the development charges background study provides and puts in place, kind of the rules that need to be followed before any development charge monies are spent. So I will prepare that in my report to council. I'll give you some background, some more information on how and why and when those charges can be spent.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. No, go ahead.
Just one further question through you, Mayor, to Dan. When do we collect the parkland dedication fee?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, if we have, let's say for a severance, for example, we collect the parkland dedication fee at the time of building permit application. Same thing if there's any development charges that are payable, it's at the time of building permit application.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions on my left here? There being none. Okay, Mr. Aquilina, are there any questions from members of the public to our planner? Are there any questions from members of the public to our planner? And one more time, are there any questions to our planner on the development charges? There be none? Mr. Aquilina, can you?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. What I have done, there is a sign. Oh.
Where? Okay. Could you come forward, please? Your full name, and we'll get you in the system as far as hearing you speak. Yes. Your name and address, please.
My name is Eric Beauregard, and I live on B237 Mitchell Street in Port Colborne.
Okay.
Okay. My question is to you. Okay. Has there been any other? Well, this is a study you're referring to, correct? This study? Is that right? Okay. Sorry.
I'll answer your questions if you're done.
Okay.
Or you can answer one at a time.
Okay. So my question to you is, what are any other municipalities involved in this study? Do we like anything of similar size to Port Colborne, and how these development charges, or whether or not they've waived these charges, the impact it has had on those municipalities?
Okay, Mr. Mayor, to answer the question, the development charges background study was done in 2014. A new development charges study will have to happen the next bylaw that gets put in place. Other municipalities deal with development charges differently, but pretty much it's consistent that all municipalities, for the most part, collect 100% development charges unless you're within a community improvement plan area. I know a certain municipality, City of St. Catharines, do not collect any development charges. That was a decision of the City of Catharines to make. But for the most part, when you look around the region, everyone else has 100% development charges. And what this actually does not do, the region has a development charges bylaw that even though the municipality currently exempts those charges, they're still having to pay the regional development charges, and they're a lot more than what the municipality charges.
Thank you, Mr. Aquilina. Are there any other questions from members of the public? Again, I'll ask, are there any other questions from members of the public? Are there any other questions from members of the public? Are there any questions of council generated by Mr. Aquilina's response to Mr. Beauregard? There being none, Mr. Aquilina, can you?
Thank you, Mr.
Mayor.
Mayor.
Any final comments?
Yes, for sure. Again, there is a sign-in sheet at the back of the room. If you want to be notified when council makes the decision on the development charges bylaw, please sign it and give your email address, phone number, address. But the important thing is to get something back to you. An email address would make that happen quick. Mr. Mayor, what I will do is I will present the recommendation report on the proposed development charges waiver. Once I get all the information from staff, I will present that back to council for a decision on a potential amendment to the development charges bylaw.
Thank you. Motion for adjournment of this public information meeting. Mr. Elliott, seconded by Mr. Bodner. The development charges meeting is over. We'll move on. I'd like to convene, call to order the regular meeting of Committee of the Whole, 17-18, today, Monday, August 27th. Are there any addendum or delegation items, Madam Clerk?
Yes, there are two delegations listed on the agenda, but there are two addendums tonight. The first addendum is the Canadian Corps has requested a letter of non-objection in order to obtain extension to their liquor license for an event on September 22nd. So this item will be added as item 19 on the agenda.
Thank you.
Also, the second delegation, Rosangela, cannot make the meeting tonight. She has requested that council consider her written request, and this item can be considered under item 12 of the agenda, which is a similar request.
Thank you. At this time, I entertain a motion to confirm the agenda. Moved by Councillor Butter, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Are there any disclosures of interest this evening? There being none indicated, to make that record, Madam Clerk. This time I call for adoption of the minutes. The regular meeting of Committee of the Whole 16-18 held on July 23rd, 2018. Motion at Mrs. Kenny, seconded by Mr. Doucette. All those in favor? Minutes are adopted. This time we can move on to determination of items requiring separate discussion. Madam Benray, Madam Kenny. Go ahead, Madam Benray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 1, item 7, and item 12, please.
That's item 1, 7, and 12. Madam Kenny, do you have your hand up there?
Yes, I did, yeah. I wanted to speak on 7 as well, and also number 10. Thank you.
Excuse me, 7 and what, sir?
10. And also, I believe, will you pull 12? Oh, okay. Thank you. Yeah, 7 and 10.
Thank you.
Thanks.
On my right.
19, yeah.
Do we have to
I
lift
have a question.
19 now?
I'm sorry?
I just have a question.
Yes?
So, do we have to lift 19 to approve it then, or? Yes, all right, then I'm going to lift.
Please, if you would do that.
I will lift that.
Thank you.
Sir, thank you.
On my left, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. 11 and 14.
Any others? This time I call for a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Mr. Bodnar, seconded by Mrs. Kenny. Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. There are no presentations this evening? No. And delegations, those who are in attendance, you have roughly 10 minutes, not roughly, you have 10 minutes to make your presentation. The first one is Mr. Corbet regarding a request for relief from the city bylaw in order to allow for an additional driveway space at 978 Steel Street. Mr. Corbet, are you here? Yes. Sir, could you come to the podium there and push the little red button, and if I have your name and address.
Yes, I'm Luke Corbeil. I live at 978 Steel Street, Port Colborne. And I've applied for a building permit for a garage. And I'm looking for the same consideration that you've given a neighbor of mine, requesting a driveway cut. My reason for that is my home is built on a concrete slab, which means my home is low to the ground, and any wires coming from the hydro are coming in really low, and the only other option I would have for a driveway is to go across the front of the house to the other side. I also have a drainage, call it a ditch, but it's not a ditch.
Swale.
It's swale, to keep the water away from the home. And if I put a driveway across the front, it's going to be like putting a dam up. That's pretty much the reason for it. I do have 28 meters of frontage, and I'm told the bylaw was 30 meters required. I don't think that that's a whole lot of room. Like I think I have lots of room there to put the driveway in. So that's pretty much my request.
Could you give me the frontage again, sir?
I was told that it was, I have 28, and the frontage requirement was 30 meters.
Thank you. Does that complete your presentation?
That completes it, yes.
Are there any questions, Madam Mayor?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Corbeil. Mr. Corbeil, were you, at the time that you applied for the building permit for the garage, were you told that you were not going to be able to have a driveway cut for the garage?
No.
Oh, okay, thank you. That's what I wanted to know.
Madam Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chris Lee. Chris, have you eyeballed this one?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Butters. I personally haven't been on the site, just to have reports back from staff at this point.
Could you tell me what staff's take on it is, please?
A long story short is that staff doesn't have the authority to change the bylaw, so that's why it's come back to council at this point to address. We have to follow the bylaws and procedures that you've established, so.
So do you foresee any problems to allow this? That's what I'm concerned about from a more operational perspective.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Butter. At this point in time, from what's been presented to staff, as has been highlighted this evening, the 2 meters will not make a detrimental effect in the process. It's just that we can't authorize any changes.
Understood. Thank you so much.
Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, I just wanted to say that I went to see it. I've spoke to Luke a couple of times about the issue. And then I spoke to our CAO to ask him if every time this happens, are we going to have the individual come to City Council and ask for a cut? If it makes sense, it makes sense to them, but staff can't change it. So our CAO has said that he will bring forward, I believe, or ask staff to bring forward that it falls under their jurisdiction. So these people and taxpayers don't have to come every time they want that to happen. It should be a decision from an engineering standpoint. If they think it's okay, it's okay. It shouldn't have to come to us every time. And I did, like I said, made the request to the CAO to make sure that happens, because I think it's easier. It takes it out of our hands and puts it in engineering's hands. And I'm very supportive of this request from this taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Kenny. So we would anticipate a report, Mr. CAO?
Sure. So through your worship to council, it is a fact that you can delegate your authority under, certain regulations that council has. For example, we delegate our authority for site plan agreements to the Director of Planning and Development, and this authority could be delegated here. The only, I guess, pitfall is a case where the decision of staff, because it's now the final decision of the city rather than recommendation to council, is contrary to the decision, to the wishes of the resident. Is there going to be some kind of an appeal mechanism? Could they come to council as a second step? So for example, if this particular case wasn't favorable to engineering and was denied, could the resident come to council as, I guess, a second form of appeal? Much like site plan agreements, there have been a few over the couple of years that council has wanted to be actively involved in and hasn't wanted to have delegated. So that's the kind of thing that the Director of Engineering and I can write on a staff report, bring it back to a meeting in September for council to consider delegating their authority on a go-forward basis, so that we don't have a number of people who have to come out here on a Monday night and join us. Football season's coming, Monday Night Football and whatnot. So. No motion required. I think we can just do it and bring it to a future meeting.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor.
Oh, for this one we do. Sorry, to direct me to do that, we don't.
Yeah. Just real quick, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Corbeil. I'm taking it you're going to build a garage on the north side of your property?
Yes.
On the right side of your house?
Yes.
Just quickly, have you had a conversation with your neighbor just to let him know what you're thinking?
I have spoken to him, and he had one concern. He has a gateway that he uses my property to go into his backyard. He asked me if it was possible to leave him enough room to keep using it, and I said, by all means, I will accommodate you as long as it it works for me, like it works for me, and he was
Yeah.
happy with
Okay.
my response.
Conversations make great neighbors.
Yes,
Just
I have
just,
two good
just to let
ones.
them know, just to let them know what
I just moved.
what you're gonna plan.
Yeah, I
good.
just moved to Port and
Okay.
met my neighbors, and they're great,
Yeah,
great
okay,
neighbors.
Great, thank you, that's all.
Yeah.
Would council, someone in council care to make a motion? Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will make the motion that the request from the Luke Corbell regarding the city bylaw in order to allow the additional driveway at his place of residence be recommended. I recommend that.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Madam Demery? Is there any further discussion? There being none, those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Garway.
Shut this off.
There is a second delegation from Rosangela Alexandri. She's not here, but she has spoken with our clerk. Could you clarify this, Madam Clerk?
Yes, she has a written request, and we will deal with that under item 12 because they're both similar requests.
Okay. Mayor's report. Yeah, it's regarding item number 1. That's Mr. Schultz. You'll be up soon, Mrs. Schultz. Not yet, not yet. My report was as follows. Canal Days. I would like to extend our appreciation to the many staff and volunteers who pulled together to make our 40th annual Canal Days a fabulous success. To the many thousands of visitors and residents, we hope you enjoyed what we had to offer and will come back to our city at your pleasure. I've heard mostly positive comments about the change in venues for the concert series, the kite show, and the car show. I have to agree. Working together, we can do great things in this city. The community-based risk assessment, there was a question on that a couple of meetings back. I'm pleased to report that since we sent a letter to the Minister of Environment, Conservation and Parks on July 19th, we have now received confirmation that they are prepared to meet with ourselves, Valet, and Public Health concerning the community-based risk assessment. A meeting is being scheduled for the end of September. The Berkeley B1 fishing tournament returned to our community. It also was a great success with the weather cooperating much better than it did last year. Over 100 participants took in the 2-day tournament, with many arriving early to get a feel for the lake. This tournament is a big booster for our city, and we thank Mr. Ben Wu and the tournament organizers for locating it here. Our portion of Lake Erie is a wonderful recreational fishery, and it's getting known throughout the province for this. The Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority, at our last meeting, Councillor Butters inquired as to the status of the report from the Auditor General regarding the Niagara Peninsula Conservation Authority. In fact, the Auditor General's team gave a confidential oral report at the MPCA meeting the following Wednesday. Unfortunately, parts of the report had been leaked. The Auditor General was very embarrassed, most annoyed, and committed to undertaking an investigation on the source of the leak. It is anticipated that the final report will be released by the end of August or early September. Association of Municipalities of Ontario Annual Conference was last weekend. CEO Scott Louie and I attended the conference in Ottawa with many other representatives of the Niagara region. In coordination with the Niagara region, we had the opportunity to meet with 5 provincial ministers to raise awareness of issues affecting the Niagara region. Our Senior Citizens Advisory Committee strategic plan, our committee met earlier this month to map out their strategic plan for the coming year. Areas they focused on were communication and information, transportation, housing, health services, and community support, and social participation as it relates to seniors. The members expect to have a well-defined plan put together by November of this year, with actual items that focus on improving overall health and well-being of seniors in our community. Meetings are held at City Hall the third Thursday of each month at 10 a.m. Residents wishing more information about the committee's work can check out the city's website or contact the committee chair. Project Zero. I want to extend appreciation of council and the residents of the city of Port Colborne for the generous donation of 150 smoke and the carbon monoxide alarms by Enbridge Gas Distribution as a part of their Project Zero, a public education campaign that is providing more than 600 alarms to residents in 30 Ontario municipalities. This year, Enbridge invested $200,000 in Project Zero, and our community was fortunate to be included. In the words of Fire Chief Tom Cartwright, these efforts will undoubtedly save lives through the distribution of these smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. We are saving lives through education, fire prevention, and enforcement. Never think it can happen to you. Can't happen to you. We have, most recently, we had a number of incidents in the downtown core with respect to vandalism, assaults, and it's an area where we're very concerned about. I met with the staff sergeant approximately 3 weeks ago on this issue, and it would appear that it's urgent that we have another meeting with, we'll go as far as we can, go up to the chief of police if he's available to meet, but it's a situation that's no longer, was never acceptable, but it's certainly not acceptable now. There are criminal violations on a regular basis, and I hate to say it, it's like Dodge City out there and sometimes. So that we're aware of it. I've had one meeting, and it would appear that we're going to require additional meetings on this subject, and we look forward to them. We'll be certainly, Mrs. Conk, the BIA would be included, definitely, as well as the residents who live in the downtown core. It's a situation that cannot be tolerated, period. That's the extent of my report. Does any member of council have a question? Madam Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have I guess a request and then two questions. So I got a call from a resident that along the Friendship Trail, particularly in the weekends, there's an awful lot of ATV on the trail, motorcycles, and then of course in the wintertime the snowmobile. So I was wondering, you know, when you meet with the staff sergeant and when that meeting comes out, could it kind of be a part of, like, we need some kind of enforcement across the city, but we also need to be looking at our trails, because for somebody walking, like this lady walks her dog every day on the trail in around the Wildwood Road, Shirkston kind of corridor area, and she doesn't feel too safe when, you know, an ATV is coming up on her, or even cyclists sometimes aren't using the best etiquette, right? If she knows they're coming, she can get have her dog right close by and not be worried about anything happening. But a lot of times she doesn't have that warning. So she's really looking to see if we can get some more enforcement, especially on the weekends. A lot of times what happens, and it's happened in the past, where, you know, we've had some police presence and then they quit for a while. And so I think it's just really important that, you know, when we present whatever package kind of difficulties that we have here, that be included as part of what we need to be looking at as well.
Thank you for your comments. We'll definitely put that item on the list.
And then I have two more questions.
Okay. On that issue, though.
No, different one. But under a mayor's.
ATVs and motorcycles are not allowed on the trail.
Correct.
And so it's a policing issue, and we'd like to see more police presence to enforce that. Your questions now.
Okay, so we don't have a regional counselor, so you have to put your regional counselor hat on.
Okay.
Okay? So,
if I can answer it, yeah.
Well, I don't know if you can or not, but I've been asking like a lot of different people, and I can't seem to get a straight answer out of anybody. But you probably are more than aware that stuff's just been blowing up about the last regional council meeting and Chair Caslin extending the contract of CEO D'Angelo. And my question to anybody who could answer it, and you're here, so I'm going to ask you, did Chair Caslin have the authority to extend or change that CAO's contract without any regional councilor's vote or bylaw? Do you know if he has the authority to do that?
In my opinion, he does not.
Thank you.
And that will be an issue to be dealt with by the Niagara Regional Council.
And do you know, sir, if that is going to be coming back up at your next council meeting, how that's going to be dealt with?
I have not seen any agenda for the next council meeting, but this is not going to go away, I'm sure.
Good. I don't want it to go away either.
It will be on the agenda.
Okay, so, and my other question is, do you know if there is a method, either by motion or some otherwise process, to suspend or unchair a chair?
No. I've made that inquiry, and the chair has been elected as a regional councillor and then elected by the members of regional council as chair. The legislation in the Regional Municipality of Niagara Act does not allow a chair to be removed.
That's a bummer.
Well, and
thank you. Thank you for the answer.
Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Along Councillor Butter's questioning, but prior to giving him a raise without talking to anybody else, there was lots of news in the paper about his help when he was hired, either by his assistant, or there was lots in the paper, so maybe, you can't believe everything the paper reads, but is it true? Or are you, not that, I believe the name is his assistant anyway, Jason. Did he give the questions to the current CAO of the region prior to the interview? That's been in the paper. I just want clarification.
My understanding is that he did, but all candidates received the same questions. So he did not receive a benefit that the others did not receive. But these questions apparently were given just prior to their interview.
And he had them quite a bit ahead of time.
I can't say whether they had in a long time, but all candidates received the questions.
Okay. Thank you.
Did you receive
Thanks.
answers?
Councillor Butters wants to know, did he receive the answers too? Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Just for clarification, with the meeting that's going to take place with Niagara Regional Police Services, will that be a public meeting or will that be by invitation only? Just so people are clear on that.
It would be a public meeting.
Be a public meeting? Okay. Just so that people want to attend and raise their concerns, just so it's out in the public that if anybody wants to attend, and we'll name the time and place, and then anybody can show up. Just for clarification.
Thank you. Okay, that's my report. Answers to questions. It's been pointed out, our regional council is not with us tonight, so if we go on to item number 12, council's items, are there any issues that you wish to address to members of staff? Mr. Danch.
On the button. Through you, Mr. Mayor, and I think to Chris. There's a tree down on Elm Street in front of Atkinson's, the old North End Auto. It's been laying there for, let's say, 2 months. Just wonder, huh? Oh, just knock it off. I just wondered, I mean, I would think it's on his property just because the ditch is in front of it, but it's been there for quite some time. It's, it's not in the way, but how long do you let a tree sit on the side of the road? If you could maybe look into that one for me?
Mr. Lee?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Dance, we certainly will do that. We'll establish first if it is our tree or his, and then at which point we'll either react on our own or actions accordingly.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was another hand up over here. Mr. Doucette, Mr. Bodner, and Mr. Elliott.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. In speaking with Mr. Lee before council, most of you are aware of the Stewarts on the island and the ditch that's supposed to be there and that's supposed to help clear out, okay? I don't know if there's a way to get the Seaway to react, but we're just waiting for them to give us a piece of paper that the contractor's ready to go within days of receiving the paper.
We've been ready since early spring. We're still waiting for a piece of paper. They've told us verbally, everything's fine, you can do it, but we're not going to do it without a paper telling us we can in case someone changes their mind somewhere along the line. We're waiting for this piece of paper. We don't know where it is. And we've been lucky this summer. It's been very dry, and when it does rain, the ground is so dry that it sucks it up like a sponge. But that will probably not survive through to November. That drainage ditch has to be there. And I don't know who, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Louis, someone can help Chris get this, I'm going to say it, damn piece of paper. All we need is a piece of paper that said what they told us in the first place is, yeah, you can do it. That's all we need.
Okay.
I feel bad for Chris and his staff because they've been at it for almost over a year.
Mr. Lee, perhaps we can consult tomorrow as to who you've been dealing with, and then we'll decide whether we have to deal with further individuals up the chain.
By all means, Mr. Mayor, we can definitely do that.
Thank you. Mr. Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chris, I guess, and this kind of ties a little bit into what Councillor Butters was saying. They've recently brushed the trail. Looks like they did a pretty good job, but they really opened up the entrances from the side roads to the trail. And some of it I would think was for better sight lines, which I'm all for. But the question is, we actually made a very large entrance onto that trail for ATVs, snowmobiles, anything that now would do it. We've got those tiny little barricades at the end of the trail to slow people down. But what's our plan going forward as winter's approaching and the snowmobilers just love that big wide opening there?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. As you have indicated, staff has trimmed things back, my understanding, for the sight lines and safety issues for both the pedestrians and the cyclists. That being said, I think we have to go back and look at what we've done, to what extent it is, and if there are some ulterior or alternate actions that we have to take, we may have to address those on an individual basis depending on each intersection. That being said, I'll have a discussion with staff this week to just see what they've done and to what extent, and then we can just take some remedial measures, hopefully, without too much cost.
Okay. Not too worried about the cost, tell you the truth. I'm more worried about just having it done. Saying that, yeah, cost is important, but you know how long things take, and we don't want to be sitting here in December talking about it after the first snow. So I'd appreciate it, speed is of the essence.
Councillor Bodner, we will keep it in the budget.
Okay, thank you. Another question through Mr. Mayor to Chris. When you come off Highway 3 onto Shirkston Road, someone has damaged those chevrons that alert people that there's a curve there. One's flattened out, the other one's dinged pretty bad. Just to bring it to your attention to have those repaired.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. By all means, I would hope that our roads patrol today may have picked that up already and put the wheels in motion, but if not, we will make certain they have.
Okay. And one more, Mr. Mayor. Didn't have any calls today on the Pleasant Beach garbage situation, which when I drove down there, it looked like it was pretty much under control. Can you give us an update on what the city had told the region to do to improve this?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodner. At this point in time, we've had an agreement with the regional staff, and what they've done is they've got the waste collector is picking up any of the extra debris that's in that area so that we don't continue to have an ongoing residual amount that's there. We come to an agreement on some pricing on that for the time being to the end of the season. And then anything going forward, we will address with the regional staff.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. I got a few items. We've been away for a long time. So I'll pick on Chris for the most part. The Clarence Street and Catherine Street crosswalk, we were supposed to get that started after Canal Days. We're a few weeks out. Can you give us an update on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Yes, we've actually got secondary pricing because the region was having trouble getting people to come forward with pricing. We've now established those pricing, and we've contacted the contractor to get the wheels in motion, so I'm hoping that'll happen sooner than later.
Sooner? Sooner than winter?
Oh, definitely so.
Okay, thank you. I had a couple of complaints about an intersection, Fielden and Charlotte, due to safety. There was an accident there a couple of weeks ago. I drive by there quite often and don't really notice the intersection until somebody calls your attention to it. And I've noticed that there are trees in the corners and that there is no parking restrictions on either side of Charlotte. Can we have a look at that? And I don't, not a full-blown traffic study, but just to go out and take a look at sight lines and maybe any signage that we can put up to enhance the intersection, and maybe have a look at parking restrictions on Charlotte for sure, and maybe have a report back ASAP.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Certainly, what we'll do is we'll have staff have a really good look at the intersection as regards to safety, some of the features that are happening, make certain that the setbacks are as per the bylaw, and come up with some alternate sign options, warning signs possibly. We will investigate that further and come back with a report and recommendations.
Okay, don't turn your mic off. I got another one for you too. I had an opportunity to drive down Olga Drive the other day. I see that the locates for the couple of issues that are on that street. Do you know how close we are to making repairs right down at Olga and Lena, and then the other one on just down the street where we're going to do, we had talked before about the 2 catch basins.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Actually, we've repaired one location, and just recently we've suffered another collapse just up the street, which is obviously the one you're referring to. So that will be handled in the same manner as the other one, just not in the same time frame.
Okay, sooner than later?
Sooner.
Okay. We had, I'm done with you for a second. We had a resident that came to council back in the summertime requesting a study on a public meeting on the Gravelly Bay hunting. And I just wanted to know, I know that we got an email today from the CAO, just for the public record. Can the CAO give us the background on what we're going to do and when we should be having a public meeting? I know that we had said when the resident was here giving a presentation that we would have a public meeting, and just to clarify for everybody when it will be or what's going to happen prior to that.
Mr. Locher.
Sure, excuse me, through your worship to Councillor Elliott, I did, as a follow-up, reach out to the second floor today and ask sort of where we are in the process. My understanding is we did get a legal opinion. Further to the city's previous legal opinions, we got a new legal opinion after receiving the presentation from the delegate. That has been, staff have been working on that legal opinion and sort of trying to figure out some next steps. Now the next steps that we plan to do with the public is first, a sort of online type survey that we can market and get people to come out and provide feedback on, and then lead that into a public meeting or some kind of a open house, or either a public meeting before a council meeting like we had today on development charges, where we can gather more comments, bring back a staff report with recommendations back to council. The clerk's department is working on it. I know they're busy with the election, but I'd like to get something back in fall so that, you know, hunting season is coming as it does every fall and when winter time, and see if I can have something in front of council to decide on some policy moving forward.
Okay, thank you. And I just noticed that the supervisor of bylaws here, so I had an issue to go check out on Merritt Parkway, and And while I was driving down the street, I noticed that all of the residents seemed to cut the ditch, the swale, whatever you want to call it, in front of their house, drain, whatever the case may be, except on the bend where there's like trees and pussy willows and who knows what growing in a section of ditch. Is that our responsibility to keep that clean, or is that a property standards issue? Yes or no? No, that's up to us. Yeah, thumbs up means yeah. Okay, I was kind of shocked that that much growth was coming up through the ditch when everybody else kind of mowed theirs down. So, Chris, you want to add something to that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott. Traditionally, if there is a growth within the ditch specific, then that's part of the city's maintenance. We do this in the rural area. We've done it in a couple of the areas within the urban area where the ditching hasn't allowed the individuals within that neighborhood to actually cut it themselves. So that's just something we'll have to go and have a look at and take care of it. We can do that with our roadside mowing with our own guys.
You're going to need a couple of McCullochs to cut the stuff down, because I was astounded that none of the residents have phoned and complained about that in particular, because it's literally growing in the ditch, and I don't know if it constrains the water flow or anything like that. So we really need, with the rain and winter coming, if we could have a look at that sooner than later. Thank you. That's all.
You finished, Mr. Elliott? Any questions, Mrs. Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I have 4 items. Starting with, the first one is about grass cutting as well, and it has to do with all the property that lies between the rear of Johnson Street, Colborne Street, and the actual trail. That whole slice of property that runs down through there, and the way we're cutting the grass is there. I cannot tell you the number of times a week I get calls from the various residents through that whole stretch, and that's quite a few people, about the quality of the cutting that is being done. So I've got lots of pictures where I've been over several times through the summer so far, and I'm sure there's going to be several more yet, and picked up a few ticks in the process, but anyway. And it seems that we're doing these swaths of nice cut grass, big piece that is missed, another swath of nice cut grass, another big piece that is missed. There's just no quality to it. And I think I've brought this forward before, but I'm going to do it again tonight. We really need to get on the people that we're paying to do this. I think this part's contracted out, I'm not sure, but whoever's doing it, they're not doing it well. It needs to be done better. It's as simple as that.
Mr. Lee, do you have a comment?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Demery. Yes, we'll definitely do that. We have a contractor that does that cutting for both bylaw and for the municipal properties, which there are private and public parcels through that section, but it's the same contractor cutting both, so we will definitely have to look at that.
Good, thank you. Well, there goes my water. This thing lets go all the time. Right? That's a big oops. All right, well, I thank you for that. I will go on to, thanks, Chief. Here's a good news story. All the work that's been done by bylaw officials and other city staff with a certain house on McRae that's been a habitual offender and just been a royal pain for 8 years is just paid off wonderfully. This house has been given a facelift, all new. The property is being well kept. There are people working on it constantly, and it's a great gift to the community. So that was good work paid off. It did pay off well. So I just want to make sure I mentioned that. The item number 3 that I have has to do with the intersection of Chippewa and Berkeley. The stop signs that are there. Again, more complaints by the people who live there. One complaint was kind of interesting because it was by the very person who collected the signatures to have the stop signs installed. Absolutely sorry that he ever did that. It doesn't work. They're not laid out well. They don't meet the standards either, right? Someone else went out and did all the measuring and took a look, and the whole thing is skewed wrong. So if we could take a look at what's happening there, have our people go out and assess the situation and make an opinion on whether that should stay there, should it be reconfigured, what should happen with it. A lot of people are very upset with it. And while I was there, I actually saw 3 people run through the stop signs. They don't make sense to be there, and I guess that's why people don't tend to see them. So there is a problem with those. So if we could take a look and see if there's something we can do about that.
Mr. Lake?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Demery, we certainly can do that. I'll have staff look at the details and the specifics, look back at the old report as to why that came into being, and see if we can bring about any changes if they really are required.
That'd be great, thank you. Okay, and the fourth item is having to do with the East Village and the project that's been going on in there. One, just a status on how that's standing right now. I do understand that the road surfacing will be done next year because we have to wait for things to kind of settle in on that. I get that. But sod replacement, if you take a look right now, we've had a lot of rain, so that's rejuvenated what could be rejuvenated. There's still a lot of large brown patches where the sod, because we all know that sod was not laid well at all. So this would be the time for them to come in and correct that problem.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Demery. Yes, and that job is not substantially completed yet, so the one-year warranty has not kicked in.
Okay.
So we still have leverage and dollars back on the contractor, so.
Great, thank you very much. That was everything.
Mrs. Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just one complaint, and it was from a taxpayer wondering about election signs, and they were complaining because they were on the city boulevards and city property, and wondered how that candidate could be informed that you don't get to do that. You can put it on private property, but you cannot put it on city property. And they said there are several. I just got the call just before I left the house, and they told me to go and look. And there's one particular candidate that is doing that, and they want them picked up.
Mr. Point, can you comment on that, please?
Yes, I can. Candidates have been informed that there is a sign bylaw and rules governing that, and any sign that you think might be in contravention of that bylaw, we ask that you report it to either the clerk's office or the bylaw officers, and we will pick up those signs.
Any other questions or comments? There be none? Mr. Bodler.
Thank you. Just to pick up on that sign, I think that candidate may have a few stuck along Highway 3 also. Is that out of our jurisdiction? Does that have to be?
No, within the city limits, we are picking up all signs, no matter what highway it's on. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
We're good? No more questions? Are there any staff responses to previous councillor inquiries? Be none? Move on to consideration of items requiring separate discussion. Item number 1, we have Mr. Schultz, who wishes to make a presentation as well. And perhaps you can come forward, Mr. Schultz. Take up business at the podium there, please.
Can we approve the motions not
Okay, sure. Could we have a motion to approve those items not requiring separate discussion? The clerk says perhaps we have, maybe we can have it anyways. Moved by Councillor Demery, seconded by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Approved. That's what?
This motion needs to be read.
Oh,
This is a motion for item 1.
Item 1.
Yeah.
Okay, would someone?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Planning and Development, Planning Division, report number 2018-110, subject Westwood Estates sidewalk construction.
Is there a seconder for the motion? Councillor Kenny. Okay, Mr. Schultz, I guess we're ready for you now.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and members of council. I'll keep my comments short because I think you might be discussing this item in greater detail later. I wrote a letter to council, mayor and council, on June the 5th, which I believe you all have in your package in front of you. And the reason for that was just to express my concern with a decision of council, as I understand, at the April 23rd council meeting. Just to give you background, our subdivision development, the extension of Westwood Estates,
has been ongoing for a number of years now. And as part of the agreement that we negotiated over a lengthy period of time with the city of Port Colborne, it was part of our, it was an obligation for us under that agreement to install sidewalks on essentially one side of the street throughout the development. That was in our agreement. We posted letters of credit to that effect, and we were prepared to carry out our obligations, actually in very close proximity to the time that council discussed the item. And at the April 23rd meeting, which I was not in attendance, it was decided, and I was informed that the decision was made to defer the construction of sidewalk construction until Mr. Aquilina could carry out a study and a survey of the residents who may be affected by sidewalks. So I wrote the letter of June the 5th just to express my disappointment that I was not included in the discussion. I wasn't invited to the council meeting. I wasn't asked for my opinion. The decision was made to defer, and of course I will heed the direction of council. So I just had wanted clarification as to what the status of the sidewalk construction was, because it's our obligation to put them in. And I believe they should be put in, and by putting them in, we allow people to finish their driveways, we allow the completion of the boulevards, we allow installation of trees, which again is our obligation under the subdividers agreement, and just allows us to move forward. And so that was essentially why I wrote the letter. So I really don't have anything else to say regarding the letter that I wrote or the decision of council, other than hopefully it can be determined soon so that we can proceed one way or the other whether sidewalks will be installed or not. So those are my comments, and of course I would invite questions if there are any from yourself or members of council.
Members of council? Councilor Demery, do you have a question?
Not a question, but I do wish to speak on it through you, Mr. Mayor. I remember at the time the concern I had was that there was it looked like it was going to go through that the sidewalk wouldn't be allowed because one person had asked for it not to be, and I just didn't think that was correct at all. As far as I'm concerned, if a number of people are going to be impacted, then those number of people should be paneled and find out if it's something they all wanted done. So that's why I was certainly in favor of deferring it until such time as we could have that, have those people give some input on that. But I would also agree that in any subdivision there should be sidewalks on at least one side of every street, because we never know what we're going to face for the future. So, and that's all I wanted to say on that.
Thank you. Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, Todd, for giving us this letter. I too totally agree that sidewalks belong in a new subdivision on one side. I'm glad you've said you've got right here in your letter that you had an agreement back in 2016 negotiated with the city of Port Colborne. You posted letters of credit among other things for the construction of the sidewalks, and very disappointed to learn that in this development Mr. Schultz was not asked to come to that meeting to discuss. He should have been part of the discussion. He is a developer, and I think that the sidewalks should go through. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. No, thanks.
That was the councilor.
You may recall,
I do,
Councilor,
yeah.
that this issue came up the night that we were to authorize it, and through the efforts of Mr. Aquilina, he was able to catch Mr. Schultz that evening because of the sidewalk was to go in that next day. Of course, we couldn't have Mr. Schultz here because he wasn't requested to be here, but there was one of our members, one of our councilors, responded to an inquiry of his constituent, and we were able to put a stop to it to reassess the situation or even consider it in a little more detail. So it was our attempt by a councilor to work on behalf of his constituent that brought this to a head. That's why Mr. Schultz was not consulted. So it wasn't a mission on our part. Anyway, just a little explanation. We have Mr. Dance, Mr. Doucette, and Mr. Elliott.
Yes, he has to.
Mr. Dance.
Thought I was last on the list. Through you to Todd. Thanks for stopping in, Todd, and do appreciate what you do down that end of town. Certainly makes that portion of Port Colborne look a little bit nicer. I think the sidewalks are a great idea. Those sidewalks will cost the taxpayers in Port Colborne what? Those sidewalks.
The construction of the sidewalks?
Yeah.
Nothing.
Nothing, exactly. So it's all good, and I can't even see why we're talking about this.
Thank you, Mr. Dash. Mr. Prasad?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with the sidewalks, and I think they should be there, and I'm going to move over to Mr. Aquilina, through you, sir. Where are we at with this, so that, as he just requested, he wants to know when he can do this or not do this, so that he can continue what he's doing.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Doucette, with my information report this evening was to inform council and members of the public that the sidewalks are going forward. I wanted to report back to council as I indicated I would on the night of April 23rd, and the information report this evening is just that okay, council be aware that the sidewalks in phase 2, Westwood Estates, are going forward.
Got your answer, Todd.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. And I believe I was the one that brought the issue forward to put a halt on the sidewalks because a couple of residents had complained about it and didn't want it, or one. And we wanted to see what the rest of the residents said. My issue is that it doesn't complete the subdivision. You have sidewalks that go nowhere, that start nowhere and don't go anywhere. And through no fault of yours, that's what I'm looking at. You're gonna have a sidewalk that comes out of one street and partially on Clarence Street that start nowhere, or they start somewhere and they go nowhere.
Why am I confused?
And I'm looking at, when Stanley gets opened as well, there's no sidewalks. The sidewalks on Stanley end at Schofield. So there's no sidewalk from Schofield and Stanley all the way to the end. So who's responsible for the sidewalks that were supposed to be put in as a condition of subdivision in Westwood 1, but it was decided to put a hold on the sidewalks until such time as Clarence Street was opened to Cement Road?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, the second component of my report was to inform council what is going to take place with phase 1 of Westwood Estates. Because right now we do not have the reserves in place to complete the sidewalk, it's going to have to be a budget consideration for council in 2019.
Okay, so to finish off the sidewalk on Clarence Street, and I would assume the same holds true for Stanley as well? Because we didn't do it back in the day when the subdivision was built due to residents complaining that they didn't want the sidewalks in.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, my understanding was there was no need for sidewalks on Stanley. It was only for Clarence, because at that time Clarence was considered to be a collector. Stanley was not. So the subdivision agreement only required sidewalks on the north side of Clarence, not on Stanley.
So we do require a sidewalk to be run down the rest of the length of Clarence to join into phase 2. Because if we're talking about complete subdivisions and complete cities and be able to walk and get around, it doesn't make sense to put these sidewalks in and not finish the sidewalk on Clarence Street. That's why I was saying wait to put these sidewalks in until we determine what are we going to do with the rest of the street. To me, in my mind, it doesn't make sense to have a little tiny sidewalk and then you dump the people onto the street. When they come out from the new street, and I can't think of the name of it right now, that runs north and south, Renfield. You would come out down that, and then you would have a little stretch of sidewalk on Clarence Street, and then if you were going east on Clarence, you'd have no sidewalk to walk on, you'd have to walk on the road, which really doesn't make sense. So you got a little stretch, you walk on the sidewalk for a couple of 100 feet, and then you got to walk down the road. So that was my concern about why install them. If you're not going to have a complete sidewalk system, then don't piecemeal it together. And I can understand if you're gonna do it on phase 2 and run the sidewalks through the entire new build, and if we're gonna do that, I'm assuming we would wanna take a look at running sidewalks down the rest of Stanley to build out everything so that you could have a complete system of sidewalks in that whole area. And that was my only reason for saying, wait a second, if you're gonna build it here, let's have a discussion about the greater build out. So the whole build on Clarence Street would be on the taxpayers. On the sidewalk from Schofield, sorry, it's not actually, it's from right across the street from my house. Basically, all the way down Clarence to the new build would be a budget concern, so it would go on the levy.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, in my report I indicated that right now we have $7,600 in reserves. That's not going to do a whole bunch of sidewalk, but we will use up that money. But again, it's going to be something for council to consider in 2019. At that same time, it'd probably be something that would come through operations, engineering and operations for any new sidewalk construction. And at that time, if council would probably have a consideration for sidewalks along Stanley as well. Because in the phase 1 subdivision back in the late 80s, there was no sidewalks considered on Stanley, just north of Clarence. And in my report, council of that day actually wanted to have the sidewalks constructed on the north side of Clarence once the extension of Clarence hit Cement Road. And today, that is now done. So, as Mr. Schultz had indicated, that the phase 2 sidewalks will be completed, and again, the connection of Clarence will be a budget item for council's consideration in 2019.
Sorry to take up your time as a discussion here, but I have one quick question. If that is a budget consideration for 2019, would we go out and ask the residents if they want to have sidewalks going through their properties? Or would that be a budget decision? And I know it's a hypothetical, but if it's a budget discussion, are we just going to say, yeah, we're going to budget for it, or whoever's here, are we going to budget for it and then just go do it without any input from the residents?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Elliott, that was in the 1988 subdivision agreement that sidewalks be built. If the council direction is to go back to the neighborhood to get their response, then that will be something that council can direct that taking place before budget consideration is given. The subdivision agreement that Mr. Schultz, Todd's father, had put in place was that the sidewalk was to be put in, but at the time, back in the 90s, there was a request that Mr. Schultz have input from the residents. That never did make its way back to council for consideration, but that subsequent report that went through engineering and operations contemplated that being done as Clarence connects to Cement Road.
Okay, so we'll ask. That condition on the sidewalks being installed once Clarence got open to cement doesn't hold true now, that the developer should put the sidewalks in? That's null and void.
Through Mr. Mayor, we do not have the monies to do that work.
Sorry, can I jump in there?
Go ahead, Mr. Louis.
Through your worship and Councillor Elliott, I think so in the subdivision agreement of the past, the $8,700 that we have or whatever it is the amount in 1988 that the developers did have.
What it cost?
So that we're responsible for the difference. So going back though to, I think maybe it's a bit of a misnomer to say that any kind of sidewalk construction for phase 1, which the developer is no longer responsible for, the city is, would be referred to the 2019 budget. It could be brought forward at any time. It could be brought forward 5 years in the future. It might be proposed by staff and considered by council to do it over a number of years, a little bit at a time, to ease out the money. One important consideration is that any kind of sidewalks would be on city property. It would be on the road allowance. And while some people might have accessed that property as the extension of their lawn, it is in fact city property. what we would probably do is some kind of an open house or some kind of a public meeting where people could come out and tell us all the reasons that the sidewalk needs to be located in a certain way to accommodate the uses that they have of their land and of course the city road frontage. And we could probably look at engineering solutions that are going to be as less intrusive as possible. For example, locating the sidewalks closer to the curb rather than leaving that boulevard between the sidewalk and the curb. So I think it's probably premature to say, but we wouldn't show up with sidewalk machinery one day and surprise everyone. We would probably do some consultations and at the council level with a public meeting.
Okay, you're happy, Mr. Elliott?
Yeah, it just.
Thank you, that's good.
Yeah, because I look at it as when the region did Gladly Street and put the bike lanes in. Like the bike lanes don't go anywhere, and it's the same thing with the sidewalk. You put a little bit of sidewalk in that doesn't benefit anybody.
It will be a matter for the new council to
Absolutely.
move forward with. Any other questions to Mr. Schultz? Or there being none, I'll call for a vote on this issue. All those in favor? Opposed? One. It's carried. Thank you, Mr. Schultz. Appreciate you being here tonight. Sorry you had to wait so long. Next item is item number 7. That's Angie Damaris and Councilor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Could you read
Fire
it?
and Emergency Services Report 2018-115, subject Cost Recovery Program.
Seconder? Councilor Kenny? Discussion. Councilor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Chief Cartwright. Chief, could you just give us your thoughts and feelings on this, please?
Through your worship to Councilor Demery. As you recall, back in April of this year, there's a proposal that came forward to council by Fire Marquee with regards to recouping fire department charges from insurance companies. The information that was provided, and we've since verified with the help of our insurance broker, the city's insurance broker, Tim McAvoy, who is here tonight to answer any questions that council may have as well as senior staff following that council meeting. We researched it further to find out that in fact most insurance policies do have a portion of the policy that would cover fire department cost. There are some minimums depending on the policy, the size of the policy, the type of policy. Those types of coverages are limited sometimes smaller than others, and sometimes quite large, in fact, in some cases. So there's an opportunity for the city to recoup charges, fire department charges for both equipment and manpower, as was presented by Fire Marquee. They've been doing it across North America, and in fact in one municipality in Niagara for a number of years. It's relatively new to us. I recognize, and so did senior staff, if I can speak on their behalf, that this is somewhat of a political decision to make, obviously, simply because it's something different, although it is not new here and elsewhere. Obviously, there's some information I provided to council within this report from the insurance industry with regards to their feelings on it. They're reluctant to have to pay, which I find somewhat interesting in the sense that they provide the coverage, but they don't want to pay the bill. So that in itself, I think, says two things. My position on this, quite frankly, is that the money is available to us to collect on an as-needed basis. And if I could just take a second to give you some type of an impact, I provided council with a report from the Fire Marshal's Office for the statistics for 2017. Within those statistics, that was in April, within those statistics it indicated we had approximately six of these incidences that would fall into this category that occurred in 2017. So I took the average of those calls on a 3-hour basis. That would be the average of those calls that we were at calls. 4 apparatus and approximately 20 personnel at those calls. The total bill using the insurance industry, if they had a clause within their contract that would allow them to pay, the amount of those bills would amount to $13,188 per call, for a total of $79,128 that could have been collected in 2017 from the insurance industry if the insurance policies could pay the max that we would bill. That's the average. I just want to give council a little bit of idea of the numbers that were involved here. Obviously, I guess it comes down to a simple fact. The fire department is a cost to the municipality. We can defer some of that cost back for services when people use our services. We would not be billing the homeowners. We would not be billing the people who did not have insurance. We would only be billing the residents that had insurance policies that allowed for this fee to be charged. That's the intent of this particular recommendation to council. I don't know if there's more, obviously there'll be more questions with regards to this, and hopefully Tim or myself will be able to answer those questions.
Councillor Demery?
Well, that's everything I needed. Thank you.
Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the chief. Chief Cartwright, okay, why, I guess I'm wondering is how many would you say per year do we get of these types of bill backs? Where you have to send out a letter, take the time and send out a letter and say, cough up.
Your Worship, if I could, to Councillor Kenny. The answer to that question is based on the types of calls we would now be going into. We bill periodically for gas leaks and things of that nature. There's some that are outside of this, but in this particular clause, if you have a fire in your home and it requires an insurance claim, part of that claim would be our bill for our time, the use of our equipment and our personnel. In 2017, as I indicated a second ago, there would have been about 7 instances in 2017 in which we would have invoiced. 6 to 7 incidences, based on the statistics as best as I can determine. There's a number of other calls, but they're for fees of $500 damage and things like that. We're not going to, in all likelihood, even claim, because probably the people wouldn't have claimed that on their insurance. So it would only be if the owner of the home were to make a claim, we would then also make a claim to the insurance company. And if I could use one that's fresh in everybody's mind, that would be the call we had at the Vinyl Works this past year. I will tell you that we've already invoiced that insurance company for materials that we used and the cleaning up of the water that required to be sucked up and disposed of. Fire water, we know it as. And the foam that we used. That bill amounted to $34,000. We checked today, we've yet to receive that back as far as I know, unless Peter knows, unless it came in late today. But that money has not been paid by the insurer. We have not had a word. In that particular case, if the insurance company would have paid for our time, the bill would have been in the hundreds of thousands of dollars, because we would have claimed all of our people's time and the trucks. That would be available to us. That's not to say the policy would have that maximum amount to pay, but there's a likelihood that it would be a lot more than $5,000, $6,000, $7,000. It would be under a normal household policy.
And so on the incidents that you have billed, I know that one you were saying you haven't got paid for, but on the incidents where you have billed to get your money back, have you got the money back?
Your Worship, Councillor Kenny, it's an interesting scenario, because the way our fee schedule is designed in such a way that if the person who owns the home doesn't pay the bill, we bill the owner of the home, the money is added to the taxes. That would not hold true in this case, because we're billing the insurance company, not the homeowner.
Right.
So yes, we get our money one way or the other for bills we send out.
Okay. So you are getting 100% back from the insurance company?
No.
That's
no.
the one, no.
I just, a point of clarity, if I could, Your Worship. When we bill now for our services, and they're limited to what we bill for,
right,
we would bill the homeowner directly under the existing fee schedule. This would be in addition to the fee schedule, but we would not bill the homeowner. We bill the insurance company. If the insurance company refuses to pay, we would go after the insurance company with the assistance of the company that's been identified with this, within this report that's been recommended by Tim to assist us with this. If we fail to get the money, the homeowner would not be impacted by it, directly through his taxes or elsewhere, otherwise.
Okay. Thank you. And Mr. Mayor, just one more question. I don't know why. We talked about this company that came and Fire Marquee, and now it's got, they're recommending Segway Canada. What is that? That Segway Canada be authorized to support the billing?
Your Worship, if I could, the city is going to bill The fire department is going to
Yeah.
bill on behalf of the city directly. If we need assistance, this company would be used to assist us, Segway. In all likelihood, that would be not used very often, simply because I believe we would be pretty successful getting the money back ourselves as we have in the past for other instances. But if by chance we needed assistance, they would step in to be able to help us. And perhaps if I could, maybe Tim McElroy could come up and explain exactly what their role would be. They'd kind of come in and help us through the pitfalls that may be in place.
The tent center.
Just to clarify, Sedgwick used to be Cunningham Lindsay, and they've been our controlled adjuster for as long as I can remember. And they also happen to do a lot of recoveries for other things for us, usually dealing with Sherry, working with the adjuster. So they're not strangers to us, and they're all licensed and everything else. The reason that I recommended them ahead of the gentleman who presented here a couple times is because, first of all, their fee schedule is higher. The local people know us, and the fire department already has to gather all that information. So basically, the contract that they were proposing said that you have to give us all your information, we have to handle all your claims, and we don't have any say. We trying it ourselves, or even having the opportunity, as I use the word triage in there. And it was definitely the best that I could see of all the situations, and the best return for the money. It's not my position to say whether it should be done. My job is to find out the best recovery, and I think it can be handled quite easily. If it's not 90% in-house, I think it would be 100%. If there's something major, like we mentioned that the one industrial fire, that if there's an issues with that, sometimes you can turn it over, but you get into a claim like that, and their fees reduced to 15%, which is half of what the other firm was offering. On top of that, in the RFP that I put out, their proposal was inferior in a number of areas.
Any other questions of Mr. Danch?
Through you to Mr. Mayor, and I guess it'll be going back and forth to the chief and that. I look at it as life is a pie. Now, if someone wants to eat and you introduce somebody else to the table, there's going to be less to eat. The last time you presented this with this fire mark, it was supposed to go back into safety and training. Now it's looking like it wants to go into equipment and vehicles. Like, the idea has changed here totally. And the other thing is, if all municipalities are going to jump on board with this idea, I can only see one other thing happening, and that's insurance rates are going to go up. And it's like a double-edged sword here. You need it, but you don't want to pay for it. And then if this guy has that coverage and that guy doesn't make any difference. You still got a job to do. So, like, I don't like the idea. That's my personal, and I don't think that and I read what Tim had said about, you know, do your taxes pay for the fire department? Yes, of course, we all know that, but like to have a billing over and above, you've already gone through some type of personal issue, and now you've got the insurance company saying, oh yeah, we're gonna charge you a little bit more. So I won't support it, but I mean, there's 6 other people's opinions here, so.
I guess we have a comment from Chief as well as perhaps Mr. McElroy.
Your Worship, Councillor Danch, you're correct in the sense that the recommendation from Fire Marquee was that it go to fire prevention education and training. Obviously, it could be redirected. I'm suggesting, given that we know for a fact that you had a report earlier this year that I highlighted the fact that there's significant money that's going to be spent the next 4 to 5 years in the fire department for capital items. I believe it's somewhere around $1.3 million. Quite frankly, I felt that if we're going to put money back into the fire department, we should be using it for money that is going to be used to fight fires, and that would involve all the equipment, personal protection, SCBA, various other things, and that would include a prevention component. I didn't write that in here, but obviously we try to prevent fires, and we have a marketing program in the city that certainly is very active. So obviously, it would be used for other things too. I highlighted a few things, but obviously, if council wishes to go in that direction, we can certainly make those changes.
Mr. McElroy, do you have any comment on Councilor Danges?
Actually, I think the only comment I have is that I'm pretty sure I didn't mention taxes.
There was something in that.
Yeah, but not in mine is not my report was not on which preference you should choose or where you should go. It was on the method of if you did move ahead on it. Sorry, that's what I remember.
We got 300 pages.
I know.
Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through to Tim. Just one quick question. On the fee schedule for Sedgwick and also Fire Marquee, why is it a percentage and not a flat fee? Like, what's the difference in the amount of money that you're claiming have to do with the amount of time it takes to process the claim?
Well, I think a flat fee is absolutely wrong because if, you know, and you're right to a certain degree, if you have a $5,000 claim, it probably takes the same amount of time as processing a 10 or a 20. If you start to get into a $100,000 claim, you're now starting to put some documents together, you're doing a lot more work. But should you be getting 30%? No, and that's why I like the sliding scale coming down if we need to use them. So I would anticipate the fire department be able to handle most of our claims. If we do run into something else, it's a different story. And our adjusters have expertise in that area.
Okay.
Any further questions, Mr. Bodnar?
Just a comment, I like the in-house approach where we're doing, I think I suggested that right off the get-go. And to have that company in your back pocket for complicated issues, I think it only makes sense. I support this and ease the burden on the taxpayer for the equipment that the fire department is going to be putting forward in the next few years. Thank you.
We're good. Oh, I'm just not sure exactly what the question or the issue is. Your recommendation, Chief, is that option number 5, as outlined in this report, as provided for in Mr. McElroy's report, be adopted. Is that the motion that we want to, in fact, vote on? Option number 5?
Your Worship, option 5 is the one that was outlined by Mr. McAvoy, and that would involve the doing it ourselves with the use of, what was the name of the company, I'm sorry? Sedgwick, as necessary, but we would be using our own people to initially do the invoice, contacted the insurance provider, and to try to determine the exact amounts that would be available to us, and then we would bill accordingly up to the maximum amount available to us. If our bill was more, we wouldn't be, the expectations wouldn't be that somebody else would have to come good for it. It would strictly be for the maximum amount available to us in the insurance. Now, I don't know exactly if you want to use the wording out of Tim's report. I believe you call it a hybrid. If memory serves me right, Tim? Yes. And I guess I'll look to the clerk for that. Do we want to use the terminology that came with hybrid approach?
It's up to council. I can write in whatever resolution you'd like.
Just want to be sure what option 5 is. I think it's option 5 is what we're voting on.
Yeah,
all members of council.
Yeah, I can read that if you wish, Worship, exactly what it is, for those that may want to see it. The hybrid approach includes several things. For those insurers who contact us, the direct approach would be used. For those incidents where we were not contacted by the adjuster, the passive approach would be used. Point 3, for circumstances where the passive or direct approach isn't appropriate or isn't working, use of a third party to assist. And the examples would be catastrophic incidences, too many claims to handle, extra expertise required, or unknown insurer. That's the approach that Tim is recommending we use.
Okay, are we ready for the vote?
You need to set a schedule too.
Councilor Demeray?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
You moved the motion.
I've moved the motion as it's laid out on the item. That's the motion I moved, so I would assume that's the motion we're voting on. That is option 5.
Councillor Kenny, you were
Yes.
seconded? You're in agreement? Okay. All those in favor?
Right here. Can we just, yes, I know what that one.
Tim, what was your question?
Speaks to the fee schedule.
Sorry, I just meant that part of it is doing a bylaw with this fee schedule.
It has to be, that is part of the recommendation.
Okay, okay.
Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you, Mr. McAvoy. Item number 10. That was Mrs. Kenny. The Airport Commission?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Corporate Services Finance Division Report number 2018-122, subject Niagara Central Airport Commission financing for capital projects loan agreement.
Is there a seconder for that? Councillor Butters? Any discussion amongst council? Go ahead, Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The reason I pulled it is just because that it kind of confused me when it says that the annual payments are due August 24th, commencing on August 24th, 2019. Like that's a year from now. So it's August 24th is already passed, and we haven't even lent them the money yet or sent them the money yet, which I confirmed with Mr. Sinez this week that we haven't even sent the money yet. So how could we be charging on August 24th when I think today is, what day? 27th.
Mrs. Zentz, do you have a comment?
Yeah, that's all. It just confused me, that's all.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the check did go out last week, so that's why the agreement is dated August 24th, and then it is 1 year that the first payment would be due with interest on an annual basis.
Perfect. Okay.
So they should have the check.
Okay, thank you.
Any further discussion? Concerns, comments? Are you ready for the question? All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Mr. Elliott, are you voting on that one? You're supporting. Okay. Okay, item number 11, that was Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Engineering and Operations Engineering Division Report 2018-123, subject information report on the proposed staging and funding of the Downtown Community Improvement Plan project.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Mr. Danch? Discussion?
Just a couple of quick questions through you, Mayor, to Chris. It's fabulous. We're finally going to move ahead and try to get some funding for this, and I understand the reasons why we can't do it all in one, which is unfortunate because I think I'm not sure we're going to get any cost savings by doing it piecemeal, but if that's the way we can get funding, that's the way we have to go. I've got a couple of concerns, one being obviously identified Clarence Street as the most important stretch to do, and it's identified in a report that we'll do from west to Catherine. My first question is, why wouldn't we do Clarence from west all the way to Steele, or sorry, to Elm Street, instead of doing it in the fifth phase as identified? Why would we not do the whole stretch all at the same time?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott. The reasoning behind that was that it matched the funding dollars that were available in the current funding programs. That was the only reason.
That was the only reason, just to kind of align the total value of the project?
Correct, that is correct.
That being said, could you identify any cost savings by continue that project right to Elm Street? Is there cost savings in that?
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Elliott, the costing specific for each block has been estimated right now using the 2017 dollars in the previous report. That being said, I'm trying to remember exactly now what that cost was for that section between, actually it goes to Fielden is the actual part of the CIP.
Okay.
So to do that section, we're looking at, it's included in the second and third phases as you had mentioned. Okay. And I'm trying to recall the exact breakdown now, but it's in excess, if I remember right, of around $2 million.
Okay. The second question I had was, how did we identify the phases to do them in? I'm thinking that with that little event we have called Canal Days, if we're going to rip up and do Clarence Street once as the first stage, why wouldn't we target West Street as the second stage to get those two done and out of the way, maybe as close together as possible, and then have the area that Canal Days currently is situated on kind of be done and we can get in and out. They seem to be the two streets that seem to have the most repairs that are needed, underground services, and some services that we require for ongoing Canal Days.
Dear Mr. Mayor, Councilor Elliott, as you stated in the west section, it's actually in phase 4 of the recommendation. Now, these phases obviously can be moved around. These are just suggestions. But that being said, the way they've been laid out in this report is to match the funding as was laid out previously, assuming that those funding opportunities that we are hoping to get for 2019 will continue in a 2-year rotation, which is the way they're set up right now with the different levels of government. So it's strictly dollars and cents, and part of the parts and pieces fit based on the funding that's available or what we anticipate will be available in 2019, 2021, 2023.
Okay. And the last question that I had, to me, is the elephant in the room. With regards to CNP, none of these prices include the estimate where to me, CNP kind of blindsided us, that come out of the blue and said, if you're going to do the work, this is what the cost to relocate and do their stuff. And the cost is to me, is astronomical. And before we start to get into anything that we're going to do, are we going to have a conversation with CNP to determine what their expectation is for us to pick up cost? Is there a cost sharing possibility with them, or do they expect us to pick up the entire cost that they presented to us?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Elliott. My understanding is that the $8.5 million is us carrying the full load. No cost sharing of any way or a shape or form. But that being said, I think that we as an organization have to sit down with CNP and say, what are you really doing with the infrastructure? What is necessary based on build-out growth in the future, or whatever may be the situation down the road? I don't think that exercise, in my understanding, has been really vetted out, if you would.
To me, through you, Mayor, to Chris, to me, that's a conversation that has to be had before we even start. I mean, an $8.5 million bill to pick up if we get in, or when we get into this. I'm trying to figure out why they would want us to pick up the entire cost of upgrades to their equipment. They should be the one that's footing the bill. And if they don't want to foot the bill, then leave your infrastructure where it is and we'll work around it. But I mean, we've been talking about this for a number of years, and this came out of the blue. I think the last report we got with costing included the report from CNP, and that had never been mentioned in any of the discussions around the CIP. And I'm just wondering why they came at the last minute and said, oh yeah, and by the way, here's our $8.5 million tab that you got to pick up, which increased the cost of the project by 50%. That conversation's got to be had. There's no way that we can afford to pick up the total tab on that, and we really have to drill down on what their reasoning is and what they want us to do before we even go out and secure funding, because I don't want to have anything come back and bite us if we start to dig up and then get something in the mail from them. So just your comments on that.
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Elliott. That's, as you put it, the elephant in the room. That being said, is the way we've staged this currently was that those areas that were being constructed in the phase 1 and phase 2 would not be affected by any of the construction that CNP would have to do, or what they say is necessary to bring their infrastructure up to what they consider their standards. So the intent was that we could do some of these with the monies that were available, and in the meantime have those discussions as to what they want to do with their infrastructure. As you say previously, leave it the way it is and we'll build everything out around you, or do we get them into the equation and have them inclusive? The bottom line is that their work has to be done separately from what we're doing. A lot of it happens in the back alleyways and lanes and everything else. A lot of the buildings are currently fed by that. West Street is, Clarence Street, all of these lines that we see behind. City Hall is the only one that actually has a feed off of the regular street grid, so.
Thank you, that's all I have.
It is understood that those conversations will take place now.
They have to take place now, Mr. Mayor, to not only implement this, but into the future, because we have to decide, and CNP has to literally show us what's behind the 8.5 million. That has not happened yet.
I guess you'll be doing that in conjunction with Mr. Sanes, but we're assured that those discussions will go on now.
To you, Mr. Mayor, yes, that's correct. It has to. There's no other way.
Any other questions? There being none, call for a vote on the recommendation. All those in favor? Opposed? That's carried. Thank you. Item number 12. Mrs. Demery, you made that recommendation.
I did. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Katie and Ben Atkins request for fees to be dismissed that were charged for grass cutting at 507 Sugarloaf Street. And I believe we were including the intended delegation in this discussion as well?
Yes, but you can pass two separate motions on the issue. Okay. Or you can combine them as one. It's your choice.
Maybe we should be doing them separately.
Yeah, you can do one at a time.
This one will stand to begin with? Yeah.
Right, discussion? Oh, the seconder was Mrs. Kenny.
Oh, sorry. Okay, if I could, I've read through the reports, and I really feel for people who get a bill for grass cutting, and it's very, very difficult when you have a situation, especially as this, when there's been a loved one passed. But the fact is, you have a property there that requires cutting, and there's no reason for your neighbors and other people around to have to deal with that being neglected. So when the city goes about taking care of its business, that's just the way it works. It's as simple as that. We have to pass along that fee. The taxpayer should not have to pay for it either. But in this situation, possibly we could take the fee that is required and add it to the end of the process for this couple when there is a closing time on the sale of that property. Maybe then that amount could be paid to the city. Possibly we could do something like that without interest. Some kind of creative solution for this, but certainly I'm not in favor of dismissing or lowering the fee.
Councilor Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm inclined to agree with Councillor Demeray. However, I see that she contacted the city of Port Colborne and told the city of Port Colborne that they didn't live anywhere near Port Colborne. But I guess the request to cut the grass was just put in the mailbox and not sent to them in Napanee, where they had asked everything please be forwarded to Napanee. However, I think we were negligent in that we did not send that via Canada Post or Courier because they never got it via regular mail. They notified us. They didn't live here. Everything else went to them via mail. Their taxes, all that other stuff went to them, but not this bill. So that's the only thing that I find unfortunate about this, because I believe that the taxpayer should. Do I think to cut lawn, it's $484.71 for us lawn mowing? It doesn't tell me how many times it was done. Doesn't say on here how many times it was done. If it was done once or if it was done 9 times. But a bill for $484. Now they got the bill because the bill was sent to their proper address. The bill was sent to their proper address where they asked it to be sent. But they did not get the notification that the lawn or the grass was too long via regular mail.
Thank you.
And that's my problem.
Mrs. Hanson, do you have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Under the lot maintenance process and policy that we have in place, you can green tag a door, which is the door knocker, which we leave on residential properties. And that door knocker was left on that residential property with grass with a height of approximately 12 to 18 inches.
So they should have gotten on.
Yes. So if you maintain your property and you go to your property on a regular basis, pick up your mail, that door knocker is green, it gets tagged to the door, so you have to open the door in order to see it. Like you can walk right up to the house, we can view it from the road. You can't get into the house without seeing that green tag on your property.
Yes, Councilor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So this couple who did notify at least the tax department or City Hall somehow, so who else would they have had to have notified to make sure that they got anything from the city that could affect this property? Because I think it's just kind of sad that they notified the one department that, you know, they lived elsewhere, but then somehow this process didn't serve them very well, that they would have been notified that they had a problem with the lawn maintenance. And that, I mean, and the other side of that is, you're in the summertime, grass grows like, you know, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that, you know, the grass is going to have to be cut, and I get that too. I'm just wondering, like, what would this couple have had to do further than just notifying the city if to have avoided this problem, if anything?
Mr. Zena?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the only thing that I can say is that, yes, they contacted the tax department, but only for their property taxes. They probably should have contacted more than one department if that was the case. But the fact that weeds are growing, if they have to maintain the property, I'm not into property standards, but I would think that if they have to maintain the property, you'd be attending to the property itself. But the only contact that we had was for the property taxes and so that the billings would go to their forwarding address. And if any mail went to their address, most people get the mail forward to wherever they're supposed to be going.
Okay. And through you to Mrs. Hanson, at what point in time did they get, like, how many times does that lawn had to be cut? Was that once? Was it early in the season? Was it late? Was it numerous times? Could you tell me?
The cost cutting for the $484.71 is for a one-time cutting. That particular cut took place May 30th. At the beginning of the season, we got a complaint. We attended the property, was approximately 18 inches high. They got a green tag to notify them they had to cut it within 3 days.
Okay.
We went back, cut it, and then recharged. The recharge went on their property taxes June 29th.
Well, I would agree with Councillor Demeray then, that if we can help them out by allowing them time to close on the sale and have more monies available without any more interest on it, that would be at least some consideration for them. But I agree, like, you gotta know, like, you gotta cut your grass for Pete's sake.
Mr. Brissette.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I agree with everyone. I believe we've constantly sat here and said that we have issues with bylaw. Bylaw is now doing their job, and now we're turning around and we're saying, well, okay, but everyone is in agreement with the fact that we should continue the charge. Now, the charge has been put under tax, which means it'll be spread out over 4 payments. So I don't know what else do you want to add or adjust or whatever. If it's been put under taxes and it's spread out over 4 payments, that's only $100 a shot. It's 100 plus. Okay, so I think we need to simply send them a nice little letter saying, sorry, but you should have known better. You know, whatever. You know, something something decent, but at the same time, bylaw is doing their job, and I don't believe that we should be pulling it back. People have to know they have to cut the grass, simple as that. 18 inches, that grass had been there for quite a while. 18 inches, I hate to tell you, okay?
Other comments? Councilor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just what I had said was if we could just attach this to their closing costs. They're closing next month, so just a couple of weeks from now. So that may be a little easier for them. That's all.
But if you add it to the taxes, then you're assured of getting payment when the house closes. Mr. Sanas?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, it has been added to taxes, so when a sale closes, the lawyers usually ask for a tax certificate, and that is part of the tax certificate.
Okay, we have Mr. Bonner.
Just one question on this, because the next issue is going to be a little bit the same. Did we have the discussion about sending those notices registered mail? That must have been in how we decided to just green tag things, but Sherry, can you give us a thought on that?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. In the bylaw, there are several ways that we can serve notice. When it's a residential house, we will green tag the door. That's quicker service. That's a one-day delivery notice. When we do express post, it's next day delivery, so you have to add an extra day on there plus the 3 days to cut. You can do registered mail if we have a lot of other items on there, which is 5 days deemed served plus the 3 days cut. With the growing season and the numerous number of grass complaints that we had, any opportunity that we can green tag a door to speed up the process, which are basically all residential homes, we do that. But on vacant lots, of course, you can't do that, so we send it via express post registered mail.
Yes, Mr. Bodner.
So how many green tags do you think you put out this year? Just more than 10?
You, Mr. Mayor, I haven't calculated or counted them, but we do have a lot of residential homes. If the house is up for sale, vacant, windows boarded up, any of that type of thing that appears vacant, such as like 29 McCrae, we send it to, we mail it out because it doesn't appear that anybody's around taking care of the property. There was no indication that this property was vacant. It was just a house in the middle of, there was no boarding up, no for sale sign, none of that stuff. So we green tag it like a normal house.
For the most part, it works.
Yes. Yes.
Any further questions? Being none, call for the vote. All those in favor?
Can I clarify?
Yeah, go ahead.
So
We'll clarify.
what you will be voting on, I believe, is just to receive and file the information.
All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now, the next item, Madam Clerk, is...
So this is a similar request from the second delegation, so that was on page 19. She had a written request with a fee from grass cutting as well. She would like an exemption from.
Any discussion? Well, first of all, we make the recommendation. One way, maybe we better discuss this. We're not sure what we're going to recommend. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Having read through all of this, there's a lot of back and forth. He said, she said, that sort of thing. I received it, I didn't receive it. But the fact is, this is a property that the city has had to deal with on more than one occasion to deal with several situations, grass cutting being the main one. We're looking at someone who is fully aware that grass needs to be cut, waits for the city's notice to cut the grass before any attempt to cut the grass ever happens, and this is habitual. And in this situation, for whatever reason, she says she didn't get the registered mail that we when you send out registered mail, you're able to track that. Canada Post says she got it, she says she didn't get it, but it still comes down to the fact that the city had to go out there and get that cutting done. Again, she needs to be able to pay the cost for the city. There's no reason for the taxpayers to pay to upkeep her lawn. Simple as that. So that's how I see it.
Mrs. Hanson, do you have any comments on this one?
No, that was a different. Yeah,
Yes,
that was a
Mr.
different
Mayor.
thing.
The grass at this particular location was over 2 feet high. And we have recharged this individual, I'm going to go with 8 times with regards to grass cutting. But in the previous times, we were dealing with it under the weed and grass bylaw where the fees were just grass cutting fees. We switched over and we started getting actual costs for our recharges. And now we do it by contractor. So the fact is that they used to just let us cut the grass because it was cheaper than sending somebody down. Now the actual costs are getting cost recovery. So this individual now is complaining that she did not receive the express post, which you can track by GPS.
Any further comments or questions? I believe we're looking for a motion to receive. Does someone wish to make that motion? Moved by Councillor Desmarais, second by Councillor Butters. All in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item is item number 14, Mr. Elliott.
Thank you, Mayor. Region of Niagara results of stakeholder engagement for vacancy rebate program revisions, CSD 41-2018.
Seconder for the recommendation, moved by Councillor Bodnar. Discussion.
Thank you, Mayor. Just a couple of quick comments that I had. Just if Peter, if you could tell us how many of these buildings do we have in town that get the vacancy rebate? Any idea?
Through Mr. Mayor, somewhere between 30 and 40.
And I know that that's a lot that we don't collect in taxes off them, and in some cases, you're missing on what the taxpayer has to pay. I'm assuming that some of those are trying to be rented out, especially on the industrial side. The industrial rate is how much times the residential rate?
About almost 2.5.
2.5 times the residential rate.
The fact that the vacancy, we have a lot of vacancies, but a lot of repeat that have been on the books for many, many years.
Yeah.
And I think the whole idea where a lot of municipalities are now looking to remove this, and some are phasing it over a couple of years, some are removing it totally in 1 year. Reason being is that, again, there's a lot of administrative work involved on it, because you also have to go out and inspect, make sure they are vacant. They have to prove that they are trying to rent it out, and in most cases, you don't get the proper information. And a lot of them are, like I said, repeat and been on the books for many years. And so it's not as if they're looking to rent them out, or it's just a matter of that they can't rent them out. But it's hard to say as to which one it is. And so it's become an issue across the province, and most municipalities are now starting to take a stand on it and saying, want to basically try to push, I guess, people that own these types of properties to actually get out and get them rented out or get them sold if that's the case, so maybe somebody else can do something with that property. So it's really trying to make them make decisions on what they're going to do with the property and not just sit on those properties. And the reducing it over a 2 or 3 year period, I think, is a fair way of doing it. It gives them a little bit of time. The question was that we had at our area treasurers was, well, you may have some properties that maybe you're just going into a vacancy type of thing. So there's the question of whether or not, if a property is going to be vacant and is vacant for maybe give them a period of 12 months, 18 months, 24 months to get the property up and going, then that's a consideration that they're looking at for their next report, the region.
Okay, so there was consensus around the region from area treasurers to move forward with this. Okay. The only reason I looked at it and had concerns about it was there are some people that are legitimate, have industrial properties vacant and can't rent them for one reason or another. There's, you know, we've moved on from most of the industrial age that we've had around Niagara. And the issue that I had is when you have a rate of 2.5 times that of residential, and you're getting charged the full rate for your property taxes, do you foresee anybody going into tax arrears? I mean, it's nice to say you got to pay me full pop for your property, but if you don't have it rented out and you've been trying to rent it and just can't afford to pay the full price because you've got no income coming in, do you foresee anybody just walking away from their property and throwing up the keys and say, here you go?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, there's always that potential that they could just walk away, and then it goes to through the tax sale process.
Yeah,
gets out there, and potentially, hopefully, there's somebody out there that will then buy the property and put it to use. Or if they can't rent it, that they seriously think about whether or not they should be owning the property and putting it up and seeing if somebody else can do something with that property, I guess, is the alternative.
okay. It's good to hear that there was consensus around the region from the treasurers that this was the way to go. So we're going to go in on a phased-in program starting in 21?
In 2019
19
is when they're going to start the program. It hasn't been finalized at Regional Council yet because they also asked to have some additional public input. Actually, we just received, there's a letter that the region is putting out to all of the property owners that have vacancies, and that letter actually from Port Colborne went out today because we had all the names and addresses of the properties that have vacancies. So those letters on behalf of the region have gone out today to get more input that they're looking for and Regional Council is looking for before they make a final decision. So this report will be going back to Regional Council, I believe, before the election.
Do you know, just one final question, do you know if Niagara Industrial Association has made comment on that at all?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I know that they had already a public open house, and I'm not sure if they were one of the groups that did attend, but I know they had a few people in groups attend their public meeting.
Okay, thank you.
Any further comments or questions? There being none, call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. We have an addendum item number 19. It's from the Canadian Core Association, number branch 43. And perhaps I could read the salient sections, and I stand to be corrected if I missed something. But the Canadian Core Association, unit number 43, is requesting a letter of non-objection to be approved so they can forward it to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario in support of their request for an extension to their current liquor license to include the parking lot and driveway of the Canadian Core, Unit 43 at 70 West Street. And this is there will be a celebration of life for one of their former members, an unexpected death. And so it'll be a celebration of life. The second part would also, but they are requesting acceptance by the city of Port Colborne under the Port Colborne Noise Control Bylaw for potential noise levels during the celebration of life event. And there are various items there that they reference and support. And the third item is the council waive the variance fee again. You have the letter in front of you. Are there any questions? Madam Clerk, would you do that? Madam Clerk will provide a suggested motion. Make it easy for you.
It can, is similar to other previous motions, that the City of Port Colborne has no objection to the application for a temporary license extension by the Canadian Core for the special event being held on September 22nd, and that the request for a noise bylaw exemption be referred to the Bylaw Enforcement Division, and that the applicable fee be waived in accordance with the city policy for nonprofit organizations.
Okay, that is the suggested reference. Is there someone who wish to make that recommendation? Someone wish to? Oh, Councillor Butters made the motion, seconded by Councillor Doucette. Any further discussion required? Be none. I call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now I have another item here, Madam Clerk, dealing with the holding of the Terry Fox Run.
No, that was already approved.
That's already approved? Okay, I didn't see it. Okay. Terry Fox Run will be on '16th of September at the band shell. H.H. Knoll Park. We got it? Public notice? Okay. Are there any notices of motion this evening? There be none. I call for a motion of adjournment. All those? Oh yes, we're not finished yet. No. Moved by Alderman Dance, seconded by Alderman Elliott. All those in favor as of adjournment. All those in favor? Opposed? This meeting is adjourned, just as we start the next meeting. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of council 20-18 held today, Monday, August 27th, following committee of the whole meeting. Are there any addendum items, Madam Clerk?
The same addendum items that were in the committee, which is to, I guess, the Canadian Corps, so item 19 on the agenda.
Thank you. I'd question a confirmation of the agenda, the motion. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Butters. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? There being none indicated, we shall record that, Madam Clerk. Call for the adoption of minutes of the regular meeting of Council 23-18 held on July 23rd, 2018. Moved by Councillor Butters, second by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Can I see the hands again, please? Opposed? None? Determination of items requiring separate discussion. There be nothing indicated. Approval of items not requiring separate discussion. Moved by Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried. Are there any proclamations, Madam Clerk?
No, there's none this evening.
Minutes of boards, commissions, and committees. The Port Colborne Historical Museum Board of Management meeting of June 19th. All those in favor of accepting those minutes? Moved by Councillor Dan, seconded by Councillor Elliott. All those in favor? Carried. Bylaws. Madam Clerk, do we have any bylaws this evening?
Yes, there are several bylaws this evening. 6604-59-18 being a bylaw to authorize entering into an agreement with Watson & Associates for the completion of a development charges study and updated bylaw. 6605-60-18 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a license agreement with the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, Eric Roy Hughes, Don Kathleen Hughes, and Jesse Bowles, the Green Apple Coffee House regarding 162 West Street. 6606-61-18 being a bylaw to establish and regulate the City of Port Colborne Fire and Emergency Services. 6607-62-18 being a bylaw to confirm appointments of various agencies, boards, and committees. 6608-63-18 being a bylaw to authorize execution of a loan agreement with the Niagara Central Dorothy Rugling Airport Commission. And 6609-64-18 being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of council of the corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its special and regular meetings of August 27, 2018.
Thank you. I'd call for a motion to pass those bylaws in bulk. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, second by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now I entertain a motion to go into closed session. That council do not proceed in the closed session in order to address the following matters. Minutes of the closed session portion of the following council meeting, namely July 23rd, 2018, and Planning and Development Department Planning Division Report number 2018-112 concerning the potential sale of city-owned land pursuant to Municipal Act 2001 subsection 2392C as proposed or pending acquisition or disposition of land by the municipality or board. All those in favor of that motion? Oh, I thought that was sufficient. Moved by Councillor Better, second by Councillor Kenny. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.